The first time Rebecca Grayson told her father she wanted to open a mercantile that sold ready-made dresses and employed women as seamstresses, he laughed so hard he nearly choked on his whiskey. It was 1878 in Ardmore, Oklahoma, a dusty railroad town where cattle drives and commerce collided, and women were expected to marry well, keep house, and raise children without complaint. Dreams of business ownership belonged to men, her father insisted, and her ideas were far too ambitious for a 22-year-old woman who should be focusing on finding a husband before she became a spinster. Rebecca stood in the parlor of their modest home on the edge of town, her hands clenched at her sides as her father dismissed her plans with a wave of his weathered hand. She had spent months drafting her ideas, sketching dress designs, calculating costs for fabric and thread, and researching what women in town actually needed. Most women made their own clothes or paid exorbitant prices for dresses shipped from back east that rarely fit properly. Rebecca knew she could offer something better, something that would give women beautiful, affordable clothing while providing employment to those who needed it most. "You are wasting your time with these foolish notions," her father said, pouring himself another drink. "No bank will loan money to a woman, and no respectable person will take you seriously. You should be helping your mother with the household, attending church socials, and making yourself agreeable to potential suitors." Her mother sat quietly in the corner, mending socks with her eyes downcast. Rebecca searched her face for any sign of support, but found only resignation. This was the way things were, her mother's silence seemed to say, and fighting against it would only bring disappointment. Rebecca retreated to her small bedroom and sat at her desk, staring at the carefully drawn plans spread across the wooden surface. The sketches showed a bright, welcoming shop with displays of ready-made dresses, shelves of fabric and notions, and a workspace where women could sew in safety and earn honest wages. She had names of women who desperately needed employment, widows and those whose husbands had been injured or killed in the dangerous work of building the railroad and taming the frontier. She had calculated that she could start small, with just 3 seamstresses, and grow from there. But her father was right about one thing. She had no money of her own, no way to secure a loan, and no male relative willing to back her venture. In the eyes of the law and society, she was powerless. The next morning, Rebecca walked down Main Street with her drawings tucked under her arm, determined to at least try. The First National Bank of Ardmore stood on the corner of Main and Washington, a brick building that represented everything solid and permanent in this still-growing town. She straightened her shoulders and pushed through the heavy door. The banker, Mr. Thornton, listened to her proposal with thinly veiled amusement, his fingers steepled beneath his chin. When she finished, he leaned back in his leather chair and shook his head. "Miss Grayson, I admire your enthusiasm, but this is a business establishment, not a charity for young women with fanciful ideas. Even if I believed in your plan, which I do not, I could not in good conscience loan money for such a risky venture. Women simply do not have the temperament for business. You would be overwhelmed within a month, and the bank would lose its investment." Rebecca tried to argue, tried to show him her careful calculations and the letters of interest from potential customers, but Mr. Thornton had already dismissed her. He stood and opened the door, a clear signal that their meeting was over. She walked out into the bright Oklahoma sunshine, blinking back tears of frustration. 2 more meetings that day yielded similar results. The owner of the general store suggested she find a husband to run the business for her. The lawyer she consulted told her that her best option was to marry and convince her husband to pursue her idea as his own. By evening, Rebecca sat on a bench outside the train depot, watching the sun paint the sky in shades of orange and pink. Her dreams felt further away than ever, crushed under the weight of a world that refused to see women as anything more than decorative additions to men's lives. "You look like someone just told you the world was ending," a deep voice said. Rebecca looked up to find a man standing a few feet away, holding the reins of a massive black horse. He was tall, well over 6 feet, with broad shoulders that strained against his buckskin shirt and arms thick with muscle from years of hard work. His hair was dark brown and fell past his collar, slightly wild in a way that suggested he spent more time in the mountains than in town. His face was tanned and weathered, with a strong jaw shadowed by several days of beard growth, but his eyes were kind, a warm amber color that held genuine concern. "Just a difficult day," Rebecca said, trying to compose herself. She did not know this man, and she had been taught not to speak to strangers, but something about his presence felt safe rather than threatening. "Asher Garrett," he said, touching the brim of his worn hat. "I come down from the mountains a few times a year for supplies. Could not help but notice you have been sitting here looking like your heart is breaking." Rebecca hesitated, then introduced herself. She did not know why, but she found herself telling this stranger about her dreams, about the shop she wanted to open and the women she wanted to help, about every person who had told her the idea was too big, too ambitious, too much for a woman to handle. Asher listened without interrupting, his eyes never leaving her face. When she finished, he was quiet for a long moment, then he shook his head slowly. "Those folks are wrong," he said simply. "Your dreams are not too big, they are exactly right." Rebecca stared at him, certain she had misheard. "What?" "I said your dreams are exactly right. I have been listening to you talk, and everything you said makes perfect sense. Women need decent clothes they can afford, and women need honest work. You have thought this through, you have a real plan, and the only thing stopping you is that other people are too small-minded to see it." He paused, then added, "How much money do you need to start?" The question caught her completely off guard. I estimated about $500 for the first 3 months. Rent, supplies, wages, and a small buffer for unexpected costs, but I do not have any way to get that kind of money." Asher was quiet again, then he said, "I have money. I trap and hunt in the mountains, sell furs and meat. I do not have much use for it up there, so it has been sitting in the bank. I could loan it to you. Or better yet, I could be your business partner, silent partner if you want. I would not interfere with how you run things, but my name on the papers might help with the legal side of things." Rebecca felt her heart begin to race. "You do not even know me. Why would you do this?" He met her eyes steadily. "Because I spent my whole life being told I was too wild, too rough, too much of a loner to amount to anything. Folks said I should settle down, work in town, be respectable. But I knew who I was and what I wanted, so I went to the mountains and built the life I needed. I make a good living on my own terms, and I answer to no one. When I see someone else with that same fire, that same certainty about what they are meant to do, I recognize it. And I think it is worth supporting. You do not know if my business will succeed," Rebecca said, barely able to believe this conversation was happening. "No, but I know that you will work harder than anyone to make it succeed, and that is a better bet than most. Besides, from what you have told me, this town needs what you are offering. That is how good businesses work, they fill a real need." Rebecca looked at this mountain man, this stranger who appeared out of nowhere with an offer that seemed too good to be true, and searched his face for any sign of deception or ulterior motive. She found only sincerity and a kind of understanding that she had never encountered before. "I would pay you back with interest," she said carefully. And if you were a partner, you would be entitled to a share of the profits. I would want everything in writing, everything legal and proper." Asher nodded. "That sounds fair to me. How about this? I am in town for 3 more days getting supplies and selling my furs. We can go to the lawyer tomorrow, draw up proper papers, and get everything started. If you still want to do this, that is." "I do," Rebecca said, the words coming out stronger than she intended. "I absolutely do." They shook hands, and Rebecca felt the calluses on his palm, the strength in his grip. This was a man who worked with his hands, who knew what it meant to build something from nothing. As they stood there in the fading light, she felt hope kindle in her chest for the first time in days. The next morning, Rebecca met Asher at the office of Samuel Crawford, the lawyer she had consulted the previous day. Mr. Crawford's expression shifted from dismissive to attentive the moment Asher walked into the room. The mountain man had cleaned up somewhat, though he still looked wild compared to the town's businessmen. But there was something in his bearing, a quiet confidence that commanded respect. "Miss Grayson and I want to form a business partnership," Asher said, taking a seat in the chair that had been offered to him. "We need papers drawn up for a mercantile specializing in ready-made dresses and women's employment. I will be providing the capital. She will be managing all operations." Mr. Crawford blinked in surprise, then looked between them. "I see. And what percentage of ownership are you each claiming?" 60% to Miss Grayson, 40% to me," Asher said before Rebecca could speak. When she started to protest, he held up a hand. "You are doing all the work. You should have the majority stake." They spent 2 hours working through the details, with Mr. Crawford drafting and redrafting the partnership agreement. Rebecca insisted on terms that would allow her to buy out Asher's share if the business became profitable enough, and provisions for what would happen if the business failed. Asher agreed to everything she proposed, occasionally offering suggestions, but never trying to take control. When they finally signed the papers, Rebecca felt as though she were signing a declaration of independence. This was real. This was actually happening. Their next stop was the bank, where Asher withdrew $500 in cash and then opened a joint business account in both their names. Mr. Thornton's face was a study in conflicting emotions, clearly wanting to object but unable to refuse a legitimate business transaction, especially with a man involved. "I trust you will manage this account responsibly," Mr. Thornton said stiffly, directing his comment to Asher rather than Rebecca. "Miss Grayson will be managing the account," Asher replied coolly. "I am just the money. She is the brains of this operation." Rebecca had to suppress a smile at the banker's obvious discomfort. With money in hand and legal papers filed, they began the real work. Rebecca had already scouted potential locations for the shop, and she took Asher to see her top choice. A narrow but deep storefront on Main Street, currently empty after the previous tenant, a watchmaker, had moved to a larger space. The rent was reasonable and the location was perfect, visible to everyone who passed through the center of town. Asher walked through the space slowly, examining the walls, the floor, the ceiling. "Good bones," he said finally. "Needs cleaning and some repairs, but nothing major." "When can you move in?" The landlord said. "I could have it immediately if I can pay the first month's rent," Rebecca said. "But he was talking to me as a woman alone. Now that we are partners, perhaps we should renegotiate." They found the landlord, Mr. Harrison, at his home office. The negotiation was brief. Asher's presence and calm demeanor helped, but it was Rebecca's detailed plan and clear vision that sealed the deal. They walked out with a lease for 12 months at a fair price, with an option to renew. The next 2 days passed in a blur of activity. Asher proved to be far more than just financial backing. He showed up at the shop early each morning with tools and set to work repairing shelves, reinforcing the front counter, and building additional workspace in the back room. Rebecca watched in amazement as he transformed the dusty, neglected space into something clean and functional. "Where did you learn carpentry?" she asked, sweeping sawdust while he installed new shelving. "You learn a lot of skills when you live alone in the mountains," Asher replied, measuring a board. "If something breaks and you cannot fix it yourself, you just do without, so you learn." "Tell me about your life up there," Rebecca said, genuinely curious. "What is it like?" Asher paused in his work, a slight smile crossing his face. "Quiet, mostly. I have a cabin in the Ardmore Mountains about 2 days' ride from here. There is a stream nearby with good fishing, plenty of game in the woods, and in the winter, enough snow to make everything clean and white. I trap and hunt, cure the furs, smoke the meat, and bring it down to trade a few times a year. The rest of the time it is just me and the wilderness." "Do you not get lonely?" Rebecca asked. He considered the question carefully. "Sometimes. But I have always found loneliness in crowds easier to bear than loneliness in solitude. In the mountains, I am alone, but I am myself, completely. In town, surrounded by people, I always felt like I was supposed to be someone I was not. After a while, I realized I preferred my own company to trying to fit into a world that did not want me as I was." Rebecca understood that feeling more than she could express. "I have felt that way my entire life," she admitted. "Like I was supposed to squeeze myself into a shape that did not fit, pretend to want things I did not want. Also, I could be acceptable to people who would never really see me anyway." Asher met her eyes, and something passed between them, a recognition of kindred spirits. "Well, now you get to build something that fits you exactly," he said. "That is worth more than being acceptable." By the end of the 3rd day, the shop was ready for inventory. Asher had built beautiful shelving, installed better lighting, and even constructed a small office area where Rebecca could manage the books. The back room had become a proper workspace with sturdy tables for cutting and sewing. "I need to head back to the mountains tomorrow," Asher said as they locked up the shop that evening. "But I will be back in 3 months, maybe sooner if you need me. You know how to reach me if there is an emergency." He had given her detailed directions to his cabin, and the names of 2 men who ran a trading post where messages could be left for him. Rebecca felt a sudden pang at the thought of him leaving, which surprised her. She had only known this man for 3 days, but he had done more to support her dreams than anyone in her entire life. "Thank you," she said, and the words felt entirely inadequate. "I do not know how to properly express what this means to me. You changed everything." Asher's expression softened. "You would have found a way eventually. I just helped speed things along, and Rebecca—" He waited until she looked up at him. "I meant what I said. Your dreams are exactly right. Do not let anyone convince you otherwise." That night, Rebecca lay awake in her bed, thinking about the mountain man who had appeared in her life like something out of a story. He was unlike anyone she had ever met, rough and wild but with a gentleness that belied his imposing size. She thought about his hands, scarred and calloused but capable of such precise work. She thought about his eyes, the way they looked at her like she was someone worth listening to, worth believing in. She told herself it was gratitude she felt, nothing more. He was her business partner and unlikely friend. He would return to his mountains and she would build her business. That was the arrangement. But as she finally drifted off to sleep, it was his face she saw, and the memory of his deep voice saying her dreams were exactly right. The next 3 months tested every bit of Rebecca's determination and skill. She used the partnership papers to secure accounts with fabric suppliers, carefully selecting quality materials at reasonable prices. She interviewed potential seamstresses and hired 3 women who desperately needed the work. Martha, a widow with 2 young children, Elizabeth, whose husband had been crippled in a railroad accident, and Grace, a young woman whose family had fallen on hard times. Together, they created a workspace that felt revolutionary in its simple dignity. The women arrived each morning to clean, well-lit tables where they could sew in safety and comfort. Rebecca paid them fair wages, something almost unheard of, and treated them with respect. In return, they produced beautiful work, dresses that combined quality construction with fashionable designs adapted from Eastern patterns, but modified for the practical needs of frontier women. Rebecca also began offering custom fittings, something the general store could not provide. Women could come in, be measured properly, and either order a custom dress or purchase a ready-made one that could be altered to fit perfectly. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Within the first month, Rebecca had served over 40 customers. By the end of the second month, she had a waiting list for custom orders and had hired a 4th seamstress. The shop, which she had named Grayson and Garrett Mercantile, became known as the place where women could find beautiful, affordable clothing, and where female employees were treated with unprecedented respect. But success brought new challenges. The owner of the general store began spreading rumors that Rebecca's dresses were poorly made, trying to protect his own business. Some of the more conservative women in town whispered that it was unseemly for a young, unmarried woman to run a business, even with a male partner. And Rebecca worked herself to exhaustion, managing inventory, keeping books, fitting customers, and overseeing the seamstresses. She thought about Asher often during those months, wondering what he was doing in his mountain cabin, whether he thought about the business he had helped start. She carefully tracked every dollar spent and earned, determined to show him that his faith in her had been justified. When he walked through the door on a warm September afternoon, Rebecca was in the middle of fitting a dress on the mayor's wife. She looked up and felt her heart skip in a way that had nothing to do with business partnership. Asher looked the same, perhaps a bit more tanned from the summer sun, his hair slightly longer. He carried the scent of pine and wood smoke, a sharp contrast to the perfumes and fabric smells of the shop. He caught her eye and nodded, then took a seat on the bench by the window to wait. Rebecca finished the fitting with as much professionalism as she could muster, though her hands trembled slightly as she marked the hem. When the mayor's wife finally left, satisfied with her new dress, Rebecca turned to face Asher. "Hello," she said, suddenly feeling shy, which was absurd. "Hello yourself," he replied, standing. "The place looks amazing. I barely recognize it." Rebecca gave him a tour, showing him the expanded workspace, the inventory, and most importantly, the ledger. "We are profitable," she said, unable to keep the pride from her voice. "Not by a huge margin yet, but we are in the black. I can start paying back your investment ahead of schedule." Asher examined the books carefully, and Rebecca watched his face for any reaction. Finally, he looked up and smiled, a genuine expression that transformed his weathered features. "This is incredible work, Rebecca. You have done more in 3 months than most businesses do in a year." "I had help," she said, gesturing to the seamstresses working in the back room. "And I had your support, which made all of this possible." "You did the hard part," Asher said. "I just provided money. You built something real." They talked for over an hour, Rebecca excitedly sharing stories of difficult customers and breakthrough moments, problems solved and lessons learned. Asher listened with genuine interest, asking insightful questions and offering occasional suggestions based on his own experience running a one-man trapping operation. "How long are you in town?" Rebecca asked, trying to sound casual. "I planned on a week," Asher said. Selling furs, restocking supplies, the usual. But I was hoping I could help around here too if you need it. I noticed the back door sticks, and those front windows could use new frames before winter. Rebecca felt warmth spread through her chest. I would appreciate that very much. Over the next week, Asher became a fixture at the mercantile. He arrived early each morning and worked on various repairs and improvements, always staying out of the way of business operations but available if needed. He built additional storage in the back room, repaired the stubborn door, and replaced the window frames with sturdy new wood. But more than the physical improvements, his presence brought something else to the shop. Customers who came and saw this large, capable man treating Rebecca with obvious respect, deferring to her judgment on business matters, and taking pride in her success. It lent her additional credibility in a world that constantly questioned whether women could manage anything important. Rebecca found herself looking forward to the quiet moments when the shop was less busy, and she could talk with Asher. He told her more about his life in the mountains, about tracking deer through fresh snow, about the challenge of surviving winter storms, about the peace of watching the sun rise over pristine wilderness. She told him about her dreams for the business, about wanting to eventually employ a dozen women, about maybe opening a second location someday. "You should come see the mountains sometime," Asher said one evening as they locked up the shop together. "It is beautiful up there this time of year. The aspens turn gold and the air gets crisp and clean." "I would like that," Rebecca said, meaning it, "though I do not know when I could take the time away from the shop." "Winter," Asher suggested. "Business always slows down then, does it not? You could leave your seamstresses in charge for a few days. I promise the mountains are worth seeing." Rebecca considered it, feeling a thrill of something that might have been anticipation or might have been fear. "Let me think about it." That night, her mother confronted her as she returned home. "People are talking, Rebecca. They say you are spending too much time alone with that mountain man, that it is not proper for an unmarried woman. Mrs. Patterson saw you walking with him yesterday evening and made it very clear that she disapproves." "Mr. Garrett is my business partner," Rebecca said firmly, "and everything we do is related to the mercantile. There is nothing improper about it." "You know how people talk," her mother said, wringing her hands. "Even if nothing is happening, the appearance of impropriety can ruin your reputation, and without a good reputation, you will never find a husband." "I am not looking for a husband," Rebecca replied, feeling her frustration rise. "I have a business to run. That is enough for me." But later, alone in her room, she wondered if that was entirely true. She thought about Asher's hands, strong and gentle, about the way he looked at her like she was someone remarkable, about how safe she felt when he was near. She thought about the conversations they had, the easy way they understood each other, the way he made her laugh with his dry observations about town life. This was not part of the plan. She was supposed to be focused on her business, on proving everyone wrong, on building something that mattered. Feelings for her business partner, especially one who lived alone in the mountains and came to town only a few times a year, would complicate everything. But the heart, Rebecca was discovering, did not care much about plans. Asher left at the end of the week, promising to return before Christmas. Rebecca threw herself back into work with renewed energy, partly to prove to herself that she did not need him there, that her life was full and satisfying on its own. She expanded the business further, adding a small selection of fabrics that women could purchase for home sewing, along with patterns and notions. She hired a fifth seamstress and began staying open later in the evenings to accommodate women who worked during the day. The general store owner escalated his campaign against her, spreading increasingly vicious rumors. Rebecca countered by ensuring that every dress that left her shop was perfect, that every customer received exceptional service, and that her business practices were beyond reproach. Slowly, steadily, her reputation grew stronger while his complaints began to sound like the petty jealousy they were. By November, Grayson and Garrett Mercantile was the most successful women's clothing shop within 100 miles. Rebecca had paid back 20% of Asher's initial investment and was on track to repay him in full within 2 years. She should have felt triumphant, vindicated, proud. Instead, she felt lonely. She realized with a start that she missed Asher, not just as a business partner or friend, but as someone who had become essential to her happiness. She missed his quiet presence, his thoughtful observations, the way he looked at her like she was the most fascinating person in the world. She missed the sound of his voice and the safety she felt when he was near. This was dangerous territory. Rebecca had built her entire adult life around the idea that she did not need a man, that she could be complete and successful on her own. The business was supposed to be enough. Independence was supposed to be enough. But when Asher walked through the door 3 days before Christmas, carrying a fresh pine wreath he had made himself and a shy smile, Rebecca knew with absolute certainty that she had fallen in love with him. He had brought gifts for everyone. Beautifully tanned leather gloves for each of the seamstresses, a set of carved wooden buttons for the shop's inventory, and for Rebecca, a stunning fur muff made from the softest rabbit pelt she had ever touched. "I made it myself," he said, looking almost nervous. "Thought you might need it for winter. Gets cold here, even if it is nothing compared to the mountains." Rebecca held the muff, running her fingers over the silky fur, and felt tears prick her eyes. "It is beautiful, Asher, thank you." The shop was busy in the days leading up to Christmas, with women purchasing new dresses for holiday gatherings and church services. Asher helped where he could, moving heavy boxes and making repairs, but mostly he just provided steady, calming presence in the midst of cheerful chaos. On Christmas Eve, after the last customer left and the seamstresses went home to their families, Rebecca and Asher remained in the shop, tidying up and preparing for the holiday closure. "I have something for you," Rebecca said, retrieving a carefully wrapped package from her office. "It is not much, but I wanted you to have it." Asher unwrapped the brown paper to reveal a shirt Rebecca had sewn herself, working on it late at night after the shop closed. It was made from sturdy wool in a deep blue that would bring out his eyes, cut to fit his broad shoulders and long arms. She had embroidered his initials on the cuff, a small detail that had taken hours of careful work. "Rebecca, this is." Asher seemed at a loss for words. "No one has ever made me anything like this before. It is perfect." "I wanted to give you something that showed how much I appreciate everything you have done for me," Rebecca said. "The shop, yes, but more than that. You believed in me when no one else did. You saw me as I actually am, not as people thought I should be. That gift is worth more than any amount of money." Asher set the shirt down carefully and took a step closer to her. "Rebecca, I need to tell you something, and I am not good with words, so I am just going to say it plain. I think I am falling in love with you. Maybe I started falling that first day at the train depot when you looked so fierce and heartbroken all at once. Maybe it happened when I saw how hard you worked to build this dream into reality. I do not know exactly when it happened, but I know how I feel now." Rebecca's breath caught in her throat. "Asher, I know it is not simple," he continued. "I live in the mountains and you have built a life here. I do not fit in town and I would not ask you to give up everything you have worked for, but I needed you to know the truth. You are the most remarkable woman I have ever met, and spending time with you has become the best part of coming to town." Rebecca reached up and placed her hand on his cheek, feeling the roughness of his beard against her palm. "I am falling in love with you too." I tried to tell myself it was just gratitude or friendship, but I cannot pretend anymore. When you are here, everything feels right. When you leave, I count the days until you return. I do not know how to make this work, but I know I do not want to lose you. Asher covered her hand with his own, his touch gentle despite his strength. "Then we will figure it out together. I can come to town more often. Maybe I can find a balance between the mountains and being here. I do not have all the answers, but I know I am willing to try if you are." "I am willing to try," Rebecca whispered. He leaned down and kissed her, soft and careful at first, then deeper as she responded. Rebecca felt like something inside her had been wound tight for years and was suddenly released. This was what she had been missing, what she had told herself she did not need. Not just romance or companionship, but this specific person, this man who saw her completely and loved what he saw. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Asher rested his forehead against hers. "I should probably take you home before your parents send out a search party." Rebecca laughed, feeling light and happy in a way she had never experienced. "Probably. Though I am a grown woman running a successful business, I think I can stay out past dark if I choose." "True," Asher agreed. "But I also want to do this right. Court you properly, meet your family, show everyone that my intentions are honorable." Over the next few weeks, Asher did exactly that. He called on Rebecca at her parents' home, enduring her father's suspicious questions and her mother's anxious hovering. He attended church with her family, looking uncomfortable in the confines of the building but sitting patiently through the service. He took her on proper chaperoned walks and joined her family for Sunday dinner. Rebecca's father remained skeptical. "He is a mountain man, Rebecca. What kind of future can you have with someone like that? He will never settle down properly, never give you the stable life you deserve." But her mother surprised her by offering different advice. "I see the way he looks at you, Rebecca, like you hung the moon and stars. And more importantly, I see the way you look at him. I have never seen you this happy. Maybe stability is not the most important thing after all." In January, when the winter weather made travel difficult and business slowed as predicted, Rebecca made her decision. She carefully trained her most senior seamstress, Martha, to manage the shop in her absence, drew up detailed instructions for every possible situation, and prepared to do something she had never done before. Take a risk on her personal happiness the same way she had taken a risk on her business. "I am going to the mountains with you," she told Asher. "For a week, maybe 2. I want to see your life there, understand what it means to you. And I want time with you, away from town and gossip and everyone's expectations." Asher's face lit up with joy, but he still asked, "Are you sure?" "People will definitely talk." "Let them talk," Rebecca said firmly. "I have spent my whole life worrying about what people think. For once, I am going to do what I want." They left on a crisp February morning, with Rebecca bundled in warm clothes and sitting astride a gentle mare that Asher had acquired for her. The ride took 2 full days, traveling through rolling hills that gradually gave way to the more dramatic peaks of the Arbuckle Mountains. Asher was patient with her inexperience, stopping frequently to let her rest and pointing out landmarks along the way. When they finally arrived at his cabin, Rebecca understood why he loved this place. It sat in a small clearing surrounded by towering pines, with a creek running nearby and views of snow-capped peaks in the distance. The cabin itself was larger than she expected, built from hand-hewn logs and fitted with a stone chimney. Inside, everything was simple but well made, from the solid furniture to the warm furs covering the bed. "It is not fancy," Asher said, watching her reaction nervously. "But it is home." "It is perfect," Rebecca said honestly. I can feel how much love you put into building it." That week in the mountains changed Rebecca fundamentally. She learned to fish in the icy creek, laughing as Asher taught her to cast the line. She helped him check his trap lines, fascinated by his knowledge of animal behavior and wilderness survival. She learned to shoot his rifle, discovering that she had a decent aim after initial shakiness. And she experienced the profound silence of the wilderness, a quiet so complete that she could hear her own heartbeat. But more than learning new skills, she learned about Asher. She saw his competence and confidence in his own environment, the way he moved through the forest with easy grace despite his size. She watched him prepare meals over the fire, cure pelts, and maintain his equipment with the same careful attention to detail she applied to her business. She understood that he was not running away from civilization, but rather choosing a life that aligned with who he was at his core. The nights were the best part. They sat by the fire, talking for hours about everything and nothing. Asher told her about the loneliness of winter, the long dark nights when storms kept him inside for days. Rebecca shared her fears about the business, her worries that one mistake could ruin everything she had built. They were honest with each other in a way that felt sacred, sharing vulnerabilities they had shown no one else. And they grew closer physically, though Asher was always respectful and careful. He kissed her in the firelight, held her close under the warm furs, but never pushed for more than she was ready to give. Rebecca found herself falling deeper in love with him, appreciating his strength and gentleness in equal measure. "I do not want to go back," she admitted on their last night in the cabin. "I know I have to, the shop needs me, but I wish I could stay here with you." Asher pulled her closer, his arms wrapping around her securely. "What if you did not have to choose? What if we could find a way to have both?" "What do you mean, marry me?" Asher said, his voice steady despite the enormity of the question. "Be my wife. We can split our time between the mountains and town. I will come to Ardmore more often, help with the business, be there for you. And you can come here when you need to, when you want to escape the noise and pressure. We will build a life that fits both of us, not one or the other." Rebecca pulled back to look at his face, illuminated by the flickering firelight. "You would do that? Change your whole way of life?" "I would do anything to be with you," Asher said simply. "The mountains will always be here, but you are irreplaceable, and I am not giving up the mountains entirely, just making room for something more, for you, for us." Rebecca felt tears slide down her cheeks, happy tears this time. "Yes. Yes, I will marry you." Asher kissed her deeply, and Rebecca melted into his embrace. This was what she had been searching for without even knowing it, not just someone who supported her dreams, but someone who wanted to build new dreams together. They returned to Ardmore as an engaged couple, and the gossip spread like wildfire. Some people were shocked that Rebecca would marry a mountain man. Others whispered that she had trapped him with her business connections. But many more, especially the women who worked for her and shopped at her store, saw the truth. This was a love match between two people who understood and respected each other completely. The wedding took place in April, a simple ceremony at the church with a reception at the mercantile. Rebecca wore a dress she had designed herself, a beautiful creation of ivory silk and lace that her seamstresses had helped construct. Asher wore the blue shirt she had made him, along with new trousers and a jacket that actually fit his broad shoulders. When they exchanged vows, Rebecca felt the weight of every person who had told her she was too ambitious, too independent, too much. And she felt the lightness of knowing she had found someone who loved her not in spite of those qualities but because of them. "I promise to support your dreams," Asher said, his amber eyes locked on hers. "To be your partner in all things, to respect your strength even as I offer my own. I promise to love you exactly as you are, today and always. I promise to build a life with you that honors both of us, Rebecca said, her voice strong and clear. To be your partner in wilderness and in town, to trust in your strength even as I offer my own. I promise to love you exactly as you are, today and always. They sealed their promises with a kiss, and Rebecca felt like her life was finally, perfectly complete. The early years of their marriage required constant negotiation and compromise, but they approached it as partners rather than adversaries. Asher moved to Ardmore for the spring and summer months, living in a small house they purchased on the edge of town. He helped expand the mercantile, using his carpentry skills to build additional workspace and eventually a second storefront. He also started a modest trade business, selling furs and smoked meat to local merchants and establishing himself as a respected businessman in his own right. In the fall and winter, they traveled to the mountains together, with Rebecca leaving the shop in Martha's capable hands. They spent those months in the cabin, and Rebecca discovered she loved the rhythm of mountain life almost as much as the rush of running her business. She learned to preserve food, tan hides, and survive harsh weather. She also used the quiet time to design new dress patterns and plan business expansions. The mercantile continued to flourish. By their second anniversary, Rebecca employed 12 women and had opened a second location in a neighboring town. She had fully repaid Asher's initial investment and was generating solid profits that they reinvested in both businesses and their personal life. The shop became known throughout Oklahoma Territory as the place for quality women's clothing and fair employment practices. But the greatest joy came in the winter of 1881, when Rebecca discovered she was pregnant. She and Asher were at the mountain cabin when she realized her monthly courses were late, and a local woman who sometimes helped Asher confirmed her suspicions. "We are going to have a baby," Rebecca told Asher, taking his hands in hers. Asher's face transformed with wonder and a touch of fear. "Are you? How do you feel about this?" "Terrified," Rebecca admitted, "and thrilled, and worried about how we will manage with the business and our split life. But mostly, I am so happy I could burst." Asher pulled her into his arms, holding her with exquisite gentleness. "We will figure it out, just like we have figured out everything else, together." They returned to Ardmore for the pregnancy, and Rebecca worked up until the day her labor started. Their son was born in August during a thunderstorm, arriving with a lusty cry that announced his presence to the world. They named him James, and he had his father's amber eyes and his mother's determined expression. Motherhood changed Rebecca in ways she had not anticipated, but it did not diminish her. With Asher's full support and help, she continued managing the mercantile, bringing baby James to work with her when he was small, and hiring a trusted woman to help with childcare as he grew. She proved that a woman could be a mother, a wife, and a successful businesswoman all at once, though it required careful planning and a supportive partner. Asher took to fatherhood with the same quiet competence he brought to everything else. He built a cradle for James that was a work of art, carved toys with patient hands, and spent hours teaching his son about the natural world. He adjusted their mountain schedule, making the trips shorter and less frequent when James was very small, always putting his family's needs first. But they never gave up the cabin entirely. By the time James was 3, he was making the journey to the mountains with them, learning to ride and fish and appreciate the wilderness that was part of his heritage. He grew up understanding that life could take many forms, that success meant different things to different people, and that love was about supporting each other's dreams. The business continued to grow. By 1885, Rebecca had 4 locations across Oklahoma Territory and employed over 30 women. She had become a quiet advocate for women's employment rights, offering training programs and fair wages that other businesses begrudgingly began to match. She never sought public acclaim, but her influence rippled outward, changing lives and proving that women could be trusted with responsibility and authority. When Oklahoma became a state in 1907, Rebecca was invited to speak at the celebration. She stood on the platform in her finest dress, one she had designed herself, with Asher and their 3 children watching from the audience. James was 26 now, helping run the business alongside his mother. Their daughter Sarah was 19, newly married and expecting her first child. And their youngest Thomas was 15 and planning to study law. "I was told my dreams were too big," Rebecca said, her voice carrying across the crowd. "I was told that a woman could not run a business, could not employ others, could not make a real difference. But I found someone who told me my dreams were exactly right, and who helped me build them into reality. Together, we proved that determination and partnership can overcome any obstacle, and that the only limits on our dreams are the ones we accept for ourselves." The applause was thunderous, but Rebecca's eyes were on Asher, still strong and handsome at 52, his hair now streaked with silver but his amber eyes as warm as ever. He smiled at her with the same love and pride he had shown that first day at the train depot, 29 years ago. That evening, after the celebrations ended, Rebecca and Asher walked along the creek near their home, the same walk they had taken countless times over the years. "Did you ever imagine it would turn out like this?" Rebecca asked, leaning against her husband's solid presence. "I knew you would do something amazing," Asher said. "I just feel lucky that I got to be part of it, that I got to build a life with you." "I am the lucky one," Rebecca insisted. "You saw me when I was invisible to everyone else. You believed in me when no one else would. You loved me exactly as I was and helped me become even more than I imagined." "We helped each other," Asher said, pulling her close. "That is what partners do." They stood there in the gathering dusk, 2 people who had built something remarkable together. A successful business empire, a loving family, and a marriage based on mutual respect and unwavering support. Rebecca thought about the young woman she had been, sitting on that bench at the train depot with her broken dreams and shattered confidence. She had been told her dreams were too big, but a mountain man had said they were exactly right and helped her build them. And in building those dreams together, they had created something even more valuable. A love that had weathered every challenge, grown deeper with every year, and proved that the best partnerships were built on seeing each other truly and supporting each other completely. Rebecca and Asher's legacy extended far beyond their own lives. The Grayson and Garrett mercantile became a symbol throughout Oklahoma of what was possible when talent was recognized and supported regardless of gender. Their children grew up understanding that love meant partnership, that dreams were meant to be pursued, and that the right person would make you stronger rather than asking you to be smaller. James took over the main operations of the mercantile in 1910, implementing modern business practices while maintaining his mother's commitment to fair employment. He married a schoolteacher named Catherine, and together they had 4 children who grew up running through the shop's aisles and learning that work and family could coexist beautifully. Sarah, their middle child, became a teacher herself, but also started a lending library in Ardmore that provided education resources to women who had never learned to read. She raised 6 children with her husband, a railroad engineer, and instilled in all of them the importance of lifting others up. Thomas became a lawyer as planned, and spent his career fighting for women's property rights and employment protections. He never married, dedicating himself entirely to legal reform, but he maintained a close relationship with his parents and siblings, often crediting his mother's example for his passion for justice. Through it all, Rebecca and Asher maintained their rhythm of town and mountain, though the trips became less frequent as they aged. The cabin remained their sanctuary, a place where they could reconnect with each other and the wilderness that had been Asher's first love. They spent weeks there each year, sitting by the fire and reminiscing about their long, full life together. In the spring of 1915, at the age of 59, Rebecca fell ill with pneumonia. Despite the best medical care available, she did not recover. Asher sat by her bedside through the final days, holding her hand and telling her stories of their life together. "I do not regret a single day," Rebecca whispered, her voice weak but her eyes still bright. "You gave me everything I needed: support for my dreams, partnership in building them, and love that never wavered. I am so grateful I sat on that bench at the train depot all those years ago. So grateful you stopped to talk to a heartbroken woman with impossible dreams." "Your dreams were never impossible," Asher said, tears streaming down his weathered face. "They were exactly right, just like I said, and you made them all come true." Rebecca smiled, squeezed his hand one last time, and closed her eyes. She passed peacefully, surrounded by the family she and Asher had created and the legacy they had built together. Asher lived for 8 more years, splitting his time between helping James with the business and spending long periods at the mountain cabin. He never remarried, telling his children that he had found his perfect partner, and one lifetime with her was worth more than eternity with anyone else. He passed away in 1923 at the age of 70, dying peacefully in his sleep at the cabin he had built with his own hands. They were buried side by side in the Ardmore cemetery, under a simple stone that read, "Rebecca and Asher Garrett, partners in life, love, and dreams. Together they proved that the right support can build anything." The mercantile continued operating under James's management, and later under his daughter Margaret, who expanded into mail-order catalogs and brought the business into the modern age. The cabin in the mountains became a family retreat, maintained by successive generations who understood its importance to their family history. And the story of Rebecca and Asher became a family legend, told and retold to children and grandchildren as an example of what love and partnership could accomplish. Decades later, when historians studied the early business development of Oklahoma, they discovered Rebecca's detailed journals and business records. Her story became part of the historical record, a remarkable example of female entrepreneurship in the Wild West, and a testament to what was possible when one person believed in another completely. But for the family that descended from Rebecca and Asher, the story was never about business success or historical significance. It was about 2 people who found each other against all odds, who built dreams together that neither could have built alone, and who proved that the greatest legacy was not wealth or fame but love that endured and partnership that lifted both people higher. The mercantile finally closed in 1967, after nearly 90 years of operation, as changing retail patterns made small dress shops obsolete. But by then, it had employed hundreds of women, provided economic opportunities that changed families and communities, and stood as a monument to what Rebecca had envisioned that day when she sat heartbroken at the train depot. At the final closing ceremony, Rebecca and Asher's great-granddaughter Emma spoke to the gathered crowd. She told the story of how it all began, of a young woman with dreams everyone said were too big, and a mountain man who said those dreams were exactly right. "They built more than a business," Emma said, looking at the storefront that had been so carefully maintained over the decades. They built a partnership based on mutual respect, unwavering support, and absolute faith in each other. They showed that the right person does not ask you to dream smaller, but helps you build your dreams bigger than you ever imagined. That legacy lives on in all of us who descended from them, in every woman who worked here and supported her family, in every person who learned that dreams and love are not opposites, but partners themselves. The applause echoed down Main Street, and if you believed in such things, you might have imagined two spirits watching from somewhere beyond, a strong mountain man with amber eyes and a determined woman with dreams too big for her time, smiling at what they had built together and the love that had made it all possible. In the end, Rebecca had been right about everything that mattered. Her dreams were not too big. They were exactly right. And with the right partner beside her, she had built them into reality and created a legacy that endured far beyond her own lifetime. The story of Rebecca and Asher Garrett became more than just a love story or a business success story. It became proof that when two people truly support each other, when they build together rather than compete, when they see each other clearly and love what they see, there is no dream too big and no obstacle too great. Their love story echoed through generations, whispered between mothers and daughters, shared between partners facing their own challenges. It reminded people that the Wild West was not just about cowboys and outlaws, but about dreamers and builders, about women who dared to imagine more and men who were secure enough to help them achieve it. And somewhere in the Arbuckle Mountains, the cabin still stood, maintained by the family as a reminder of where it all began. Inside, on a shelf above the fireplace, sat a simple fur muff made from rabbit pelts, carefully preserved through the decades. Next to it hung a blue wool shirt with initials embroidered on the cuff, faded now but still beautiful. These were the artifacts of a love story that changed lives, built dreams, and proved that the right partnership could accomplish anything. These were the remnants of two people who found each other when they needed it most and built a life together that honored both of them completely. The dreams had been exactly right, and the love that built them had been perfect.